by the right person, and some unbiased, unpurchasable senator or representative will write legislation, and maybe I can get meetings with these people somehow and explain how it works. I'm sure a lot of people know, but I didn't, and I sure wish I had, because my family would suffer a lot less if I had, and I'd be suffering a lot less. But there's a verse that says, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper," and there's also a verse that talks about how God won't let us suffer. The people who love Him, He won't let us suffer without a purpose, without a greater purpose for it. So I can't help but think this is not how the story ends, that my family's just screwed into the dust and that my kids are destitute and they have no future. Like, I just have to believe there's more for them, and that there's a reason all this happened. And I would love to see it. I hope we can see it in my lifetime. At the minimum, I hope my kids see it. But maybe this happened to me because maybe somehow I can get heard, and we end 510K, or at least change it, or at least let doctors know that the research is being bought and bribed and purchased. And sometimes when that influential surgeon you think is the best, and he says, "Oh, this is great," and he does a presentation, like, you understand he's making $750,000 in 1 year just to be a consultant. He didn't develop the product. He had no part in development of the product, and he's getting paid for every unit of the product sold. So of course he's going to keep pimping the device. I don't know. I couldn't even get members of my family to understand that they need to know what's in their devices before they're implanted. They need to know you need to call if you've ever had a surgery and they've ever implanted anything in you. Call the hospital. Tell them you need a copy of the operative notes. In the operative notes, there will be stickers. They look like little UPC codes. In the stickers, you will see an actual name of a product. You need to write all those product names down. It's anything that's used in the surgery, in you. You need to know what they are. You need to know what your devices are made of. You need to look it up on the FDA's website for adverse reports from random people. You need to know there are no joint registries right now in this country because the industry does not want them, frankly, and they do a better job lobbying than people like Francis in Austin. You also need to know there is currently, since 2013 and the passage of Obamacare, and it was something called the Sunshine Act, and it allows us finally to be able to look up our doctor's name, and each particular year, you have to do it for every year, you can find out from whom he's taking how much money and for what alleged reason. Now again, there is no police force that will go after a doctor and say, "But you took $200,000 from this company and you didn't disclose it to us." So it's only as good as, I guess, the group that checks for mistakes. But it's been helpful. I've looked at doctors like the Dr. Heinrich I saw here in Austin. I was in a wheelchair. I was crying. I was saying, "Why can't I walk?" All I did was spend some part-time hours trying to learn to work Starbucks, and a lot of that was on a stool. And I'm in so much pain I can't walk. What's going on? He says your x-ray's fine. He says the Pinnacle's great. He says no one else is having a problem. He says I'd be crazy to have him taken out. He says my metal levels aren't high enough to affect anybody. And then 2 years later, when I was finally able to look him up on this ProPublica Dollars for Doctors website, I found out he made $760,000 that year alone, not off his practice and his normal surgical practice, what he got paid for surgery and seeing patients and all that, but just from Johnson & Johnson as a consultant. And then I found out from the trial, going to the bellwether trials, the test trials, the second and third test trials held in Dallas, that when Johnson & Johnson figured out there were problems with their Pinnacle device, one internal email said, we need to market through this storm. Not recall, not write doctors and warn them that they need to bring their patients back in and get their cobalt and chromium levels tested, get Mars MRIs, get other diagnostic tests to see what's being damaged, not echocardiograms, which we know cobalt is a detrimental metal to cardiac tissue. We know this from years ago when a beer company was adding cobalt as an anti-foaming agent to its beer, and a couple of people died and a lot of people got really sick, and they're like, oh, cobalt destroys the heart. So anyway, they did nothing. They doubled down on marketing. They started hiring doctors, surgeons as consultants. The surgeons do not have to disclose to you that they are consultants for J&J, DePuy Synths, I think is the name of the company, but it's all now Johnson & Johnson. So, you know, if grandma had a device in place, or grandpa got a hip replacement and he's never been the same since, he seems to have dementia, memory problems, a lot of pain, visual problems, hearing problems, tinnitus. I had kidney pain, which has never been linked to this, but it's suddenly gone now that I've gotten the hips taken out. Nobody thinks to connect the two. And those of us who are young who have these problems realize there is a connection. And sadly, all the old people, they're probably going to get missed. No one's going to think to connect the two. Your metal on metal hip with all these other neurological, cardiac, and other pain-based symptoms. Also mood, because, you know, it's a neurotoxin, cobalt and chromium. So, you know, mood swings, anger, rage attacks, depression, anxiety, like these are things that, yeah, everybody can have. Why in the world would you think they're connected to cobalt and chromium coming from your hip? In the first place, you don't even know what your hip is made of. Like, you don't even know what your device, who made it, and what the product model is. You need to know those things. You need to start researching it, and I'd love to help in any way I can. There are a couple of us, a lot of us in fact, who would love to help you. And then finally, before I go, I would advise that you join the Facebook group called Total Hip Replacement News. Total Hip Replacement News. It was founded by Earl Stevens, I believe, who was a blogger who had something like this happen to him and just became one of the first to start writing about it. And then also look online, Steven, Steven Tower, Tower. He's a physician, an orthopedic surgeon from Anchorage, Alaska. He was an orthopedic surgeon. He said he drank the Kool-Aid. He believed metal was great. He believed all the marketing sent to him. He got himself planted. He was a big, mountain biker, an extremely active person. Got himself implanted with these things, and they really did a number on him. He got one hip, and had horrible neurological symptoms, had some scarring of the heart walls, is also what we found in me on echocardiogram. And so, he became a believer that this stuff is bad. There happened to be a doctor upstairs from him or downstairs in some sort of functional brain imaging department, and he said, hey, let me send some of my patients up to you, because a lot of what they're having is memory problems, mood disorders, whatever. Let's look at their brains. on FDG PET scan. Very expensive, very hard to get. Insurance won't pay for it, but he started looking at even his younger patients, and they had dementia-like problems. So if you look up either a Dr. Robert Bridges or a Dr. Steve Tower from Anchorage, Alaska, listen to anything they have to say on YouTube, because they do these studies. They present the findings at medical conferences. Those are recorded. They may be hard for you to understand if you don't have a medical background, but they're still worth listening to. And also, Stuart Talley is an attorney who's done a great job chronicling what's been happening in the bellwether trials since, I believe, 2015. There have been 4, maybe 5 bellwether trials. Basically, so many people have sued related to the Pinnacle hip, the Johnson & Johnson metal on metal. It means it has a metal liner and a metal ball inside a titanium socket on a titanium stem. But it's the ball and the liner touching that causes the problem. Sheds the metal, cobalt, chromium, bearing surfaces rubbing against each other, creating debris, getting in your blood. He does a great job kind of outlining from a legal perspective what's happening. And if you don't have legal counsel yet, I would recommend him or Mark Lanier. He's in Houston, Texas. He's been the one taking these bellwether cases to court. I saw him in court. I would just say that he has a passion for this because he believes in right and wrong. I think he's been so successful in life. It's not about money for him. He doesn't need the money. It's just, it's wrong, and he's like mad about it. And it, only some people are gifted enough to tackle such a behemoth as the pharmaceutical industry. And he's very likable. He's not slick. He presents a clear case. I cried when I heard him speak for the first time because he's just telling the truth. So my case was not filed with him. I wish it had been. My case means nothing. It doesn't save my family. It doesn't give me back what I want, which is a good childhood for my kids. So, and it's going to be decades before any of this is resolved. They'll never make my family whole. We lost too much. And frankly, I don't want Johnson & Johnson's money, because now I know how it's made. It's made on the backs of people like my friend Tammy, who's the mesh victim, who's having a kidney removed from all this. If that's how they make their money, I don't want it. I don't need it. God can fix my family. God can bless my family with or without money. So I think it's important to file, because if these cases didn't go to court, we wouldn't be able to see the formally confidential memos between executives at these companies. So most of these companies made these things. This frenzy when the Birmingham started selling like crazy, everybody was like, oh my gosh, we got to get one, because they were going to take over market share, the maker of the Birmingham. So I'm so thankful these things are going to court. I think Judge Kincaid, who's been handling the bellwether cases, did an awesome job. Unfortunately, the first win was just overturned by 3 judges in Louisiana. Basically, Lanier was trying to kind of as a example of, hey, this is the kind of the way J&J's done business. They brought up the bribery that I can't remember which federal group it was, but not the Federal Trade Commission, the Justice Department, I think, several years ago, said, like, look, you guys, we don't believe in bribing the managers or the leaders of other countries in order to get gain as far as marketplace share. And you guys have been bribing, leaders of Greece and Iraq, even when Saddam Hussein's people were in charge, and we're going to fine you for it. So they got fined like tens of millions of dollars, barely made the news. because this is just the way medicine's done now, especially internationally. So he brought that up. He brought that from former, I think it's called a deferred prosecution agreement, a DPA. He introduced it in court. Judge Kincaid allowed it to be brought up because I guess he too felt like it was significant in terms of showing to the jurors, look, this is a company with a life of crime and not just making a few mistakes with regard to this one product. So he allowed it to be presented as evidence or as part of the character witness part of the trial, and 3 judges in New Orleans said, nah, that shouldn't have been included, so they threw the whole verdict out. That was something like the $500 million verdict for the Texas victims, the 5 Texas victims. So I imagine J&J will appeal on the next cases, which were the California and the New York or New Jersey plaintiffs, 5 or 6 in each case, and I think they'll all be overturned because this is just a delay tactic. But they'll be won again. They'll win again even without including that, and they'll win, and it'll take another 10 years. So it's not going to help my family, and a lot of people will die in the meantime. So anyway, Stuart Talley's good for that, and maybe to handle your case if it can still be filed. Mark Lanier is a complete rock star, and I love his office, and I wish I could interview him someday because he best knows the story of how this all happened. I hope to bring that to you someday. But I'm right at an hour, so I should shut up. Thanks. Keep in touch, and I love you, and I pray for those of you who've been hurt, and I pray for those of you who've made the decisions to make this happen, because God says pray for my enemies, and whether you know it or not, you became my enemy when you made the decisions that did this to my family. So I pray for you. I hope your kids are blessed, and I hope you have great lives. I hope your kids get everything they want in life, and I hope you understand this was wrong, but know that I forgive you. Thanks. Bye.